I can tell you in my years and years of coverage, there is nothing regular or usual about any of the events you just described, Sarah. The idea that the president would tweet out the criticism of the Fed, that there would be several stories backing up the idea that the president was exploring the idea of getting rid of the Federal Reserve chairman. The idea that the Treasury Secretary would call the heads of the biggest banks from vacation in Cabo to check on their liquidity. Nothing usual or regular about that, Sarah. And I think it might be one of the reasons we're on the verge of, I guess you'd call it the worst Christmas Eve stock decline ever, was what Pisani called it. And let's go through this. So this afternoon, the president tweeted, and I quote, "The only problem our economy had is the Fed. They have no feel for the market, don't understand trade wars or strong dollars or Democrat shutdowns over borders." Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin convened today the president's working group on capital markets, described as, quote, "a check-in to discuss coordinating government function during the shutdown." On Sunday, the Treasury Secretary issued a statement saying he talked to the heads of the 5 biggest banks and they assured him there was ample liquidity, a question no one seemed to be asking. As Sarah Eisen reported, they now say this was issued to be transparent about the existence of an ordinary call. On Saturday, there were several reports the president was asking whether he could fire Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, something the Treasury Secretary later tweeted the president now says he does not believe he has the authority to do. And on Saturday, at the stroke of midnight, the government entered its third partial shutdown of the year. Whatever negative effects the Fed is having from its rate hikes, and there are those who convincingly say it is having some, it's hard to imagine, guys, that the Treasury or the president have done much to stabilize the situation as markets head to this Christmas holiday. Wilf?
Steve, I want to come back, though, with one key question. Regardless of the quality of the PR and press team that advised Secretary Mnuchin over the weekend, if someone asked you on Friday whether banks' own liquidity was strong and whether or not we were heading in any way, shape or form towards a repeat of what happened in 2008, what would your answer have been?
I'd say definitively not. And I think, I know you probably have a follow-up on this, but I will tell you real quickly. The Fed has taken a lot of steps to be a lot more transparent about its gauge of liquidity in the banking system. I think, Wilf, you've been involved in reporting some of these new reports the Fed is putting out. Plus, we know what the banks have said. Both liquidity and capital ratios are at or near all-time historic highs, and we're better than our brethren across the ocean there when it comes to the European banks. I don't think there's a liquidity question in the banking system. I know you've done some good reporting on single stock liquidity, but it's hard to look at the kind of volumes we do and the lack of gap kind of pricing, Wilf, which, you know, when we get to illiquid markets, stocks go from $1 to 50 cents or they shut down. That's a kind of illiquid market. No sign of that in almost any market that I've seen. You get blowouts in CDS spreads. Well, if I haven't looked at the latest quotes on the bank CDS, but that's a measure of default concern at the banks. I haven't seen those blow out one bit. I was here and covered in detail the financial crisis. There's nothing that's been going on. In fact, it's been failure of people to remark, essentially, how orderly this rather a steep decline has been in the markets.
So, Steve, I mean, I don't think any Treasury official or the Secretary would disagree with you. I mean, as I reported, they weren't concerned about liquidity going in, and that's exactly what they heard from the bank CEOs, and they told the public that. So why are you pinning that directly to the sell-off? What's the worry?
Well, because they issued a statement that makes it seem like they're not the adults in the room that people thought they were, Sarah. I mean, it's a remarkable lack of understanding, I think, of the role of the Treasury and also this idea of the continued attacks by the Fed. And look, they're trying to walk it back. I think that's a sign of progress, Sarah. That they understand there was a mistake that was made.
Steve Liesman, very Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for checking in with us.